There.
Yeah, I see the little pop-up meeting saying meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
Good.
So that's good.
There. And I hope I don't get all kinds of strange feedback. Okay, to our dear audience, all you wonderful people who decided to come, I am going to, there seem to be mute and unmute options. I am going to unmute you, but I'm going to ask everyone to mute yourself unless you have a question and are acknowledged so that we don't have a whole lot of noise in the background. But I think the host override would override muting. So I don't want to do that. So mute yourself just out of courtesy unless we need a question. Tonight we're going to be talking about learning how to take that very nervous making, often, step of moving from reading tarot for yourself and your close friends to reading it for perfect strangers and worse, unperfect strangers who are going to think that you're a doofus and you should not have offered to do it if you weren't better than that. At least that's the fear that I had when I was making that transition. Tonight I've asked, this is Lois Fitzpatrick, who was the head of the Soothsayers Guild for a good 40 years in the East Kingdom.
No.
Has done a lot of public soothsaying with tarot and other forms. And so between us, we ought to be able to handle quite a few suggestions on how to make this transition. As I said, give me a flag or a wave if you have a question to ask, or you could put something in the chat room and I'll spot it. And then, oh, I see everyone has politely muted themselves. Lovely. Lois, looks like it's ready to go. Going to be, since we're not in the SCA here, I'm using the non-SCA names. It could get really confusing.
Okay, I have been reading cards for, more than 40 years, I realized the other day, which is kind of scary when you think about it. Like a lot of people, I started just reading for myself with the cards in front of me and a book in my other hand, checking each meaning for each card as I got to it. Eventually, I was able to, just through repetition, do the readings without referring to the book so much, although for quite a long time I did have the book next to me as a security blanket. Let me share my screen, and because I did prepare a couple of slides, and let's see if I can get this to work properly now. There we go. Okay, can you all see that? I hope.
Well, I can.
Okay. There's an old joke about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. The same thing applies when you're doing readings for others. You want to be familiar with the cards, you want to be comfortable with them. Now, mind you, I'm saying cards, but because that's what I use mostly. But what I'm saying also applies to any other divination method that you might be using, whether it is palmistry or runes or something that you've made up yourself. The same thing applies. You want to practice, you want to be familiar with whatever your method is. See if I can get this. Okay, come on. All right, let's. There we go. Okay. You might not want to start doing your readings at a big 1,000-person Renaissance or psychic fair. start small. Start by doing readings for your friends, for if someone invites you to a party, take your cards with you, keep them in your bag. If it just happens to be known that you do readings, you can do readings in a smaller environment. And that's a good way to get used to the idea of reading for other people. Learn what the cards mean to you. Every card will have a textbook meaning, which very often you can use as a backup, but sometimes a particular card will have a particular meaning for you, especially if you have been reading for a while. What you might want to do when you're learning is start making notes of, well, when this card comes up in a reading that I do, it usually means XYZ. Make a note of it. Example that I like to use is the Hermit card. Sometimes it can be someone who is seeking enlightenment. Sometimes it could be the person who is giving enlightenment. This is what the card means for me. Learn the meanings of the cards as a backup. By all means, if you want to keep the book with you, if you're doing a reading for someone and you're not sure, you can say, all right, let me double check this. I want to make sure that I give you an accurate interpretation, and use the book. This is what I have done. Not everyone is comfortable doing it. You need to see what works for you, what is most comfortable. Okay, this is what I was just saying. Don't be afraid to admit that you're not familiar with something, or you're not sure how the card fits into the reading. Most people will appreciate the honesty of you saying, I don't know this, let me check on this, let me look this up. Or I was doing a reading for someone and a card came up, it was the World. And I could not understand how it fit into the reading. I said this to the person that I was reading for, who happened to be at a Renaissance fair. She was SCA. And she said, oh, I understand. My husband is a pilot. He flies all over the world. Just because something in the reading doesn't make sense to you, it could very well make sense to the person that you're reading for. And be careful of what you say. Someone who comes to you for a reading will very often be looking at you as the expert, as the, if you will, be all and end all of readings, of knowledge. You have this great mystic talent, and what you say can affect them. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say, well, okay, a card came up which, to me, it literally just was screaming at me, divorce, divorce, divorce. That's not something you want to tell your client, because what you say will affect them and could cause it to come to pass. Most people don't want to go through a divorce. So suggest you might want to work on your relationships. Let people know that whatever the reading shows is not carved in stone, that they have the power to change it. And don't be afraid to have fun with it. If you take it seriously and respect it, the people that you read for generally will also. It doesn't mean you have to be stone-faced serious. You can show a sense of humor, but you're still treating the whole situation with respect. Tchipiikkan, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I haven't seen any questions yet, but I'll throw in, I have often kept, you say the book. I know that almost every deck of cards comes with its own book, which is ridiculous because I know there are hundreds of decks of cards, and I've only collected about a couple hundred books, so but and they have different attitude. The Norse Tarot, for instance, are very happy to tell you just what to do, whereas a lot, and I would say most of them, are better at offering you options. I like the Eden Gray from the 60s because it's a classic and it gives you some very basic ones.
That's what I started with also.
And that's the one I will carry with me to fairs, so that if I am, because a client will try so hard to make, they're only handing you the $30 or $50 or $10 or whatever it is, because they think it's going to work. And they'll be trying really hard to make whatever you say fit in with what they know about their life. You don't know about their life, you're just reading cards, but they know, and they're twisting it and trying really hard. And if they can't come up with something, which is the other side of you don't need to know because they'll know, that's when I pull out the book. And I say, there's usually 6 or 8 meanings to every card. I'd rather give you a good reading than to look clever. And they just think that that's the funny, they think that's so funny. You get this woman who has been reading for 50
More years than you care to mention.
I think I'm 53 years now. And yet I'm saying, look, I don't know every meaning for every card. And I pull it out and you get down to like the 6th or 7th meaning. And they say, that's it exactly. And I say, see, there. And that's why I pull out the book if I have to, because I don't know. There are permutations that I don't know. And they like that. They're there to get a good reading. So I have never seen anybody get upset because you did go back to the book. But when you get, you use the book to start with, and then you start remembering things. And then your subconscious clicks in and you start getting stuff that you didn't even expect. You say, was that your experience too?
Yes, definitely. I also have a, for lack of a better word, a standardized explanation, let's call it, that I give to people when they sit down across from me. And it goes something like, have you ever had a reading done before? And most of them say no. I say that most of what you see in mass media, TV, and movies is not necessarily correct. I explain how the cards work different ways for different people, that some people are better at picking up when something will happen. I'm better at picking up on the emotional aspects of it. That it's like going to a friend for advice. You ask your friend, you listen to what your friend has to say, and you say to yourself, self, this advice is good, I will do this. Or you say to yourself, self, this advice stinks, you throw the advice out the window, and you try not to throw the friend out the window with the advice because that leads to broken glass and blood and sirens, and you don't need that kind of trouble. It gives them a laugh, it makes them relax. I also say that If you don't like what the cards show, you can ignore it, you can change it. You know more about your life than a deck of paper cards. And finally, what's the last thing that I usually explain? It's been so long since I've done it, actually. If you don't like what the cards show, you can change it. And the cards will sometimes show you what they think it's important for you to know, which may not be the question that you are consciously or subconsciously asking. And once they say that they understand all of that, I will start doing my reading.
I totally relate to that. I cannot tell you how many little girls, excuse me, that sounds a little disrespectful, hopeful teenage females come up to you and they want to know about their love life, or it immediately goes into job opportunities, or somebody who comes up and wants to know about what their money situation is going to be, and it's all about relationships. I call that stubborn cards. And usually what I do after that is, if once it's told them what it wants to say, I usually will sneak in an extra, like a 3-card reading, just to try and answer the question that they had in the front of their mind, because I feel sorry for them, because stubborn cards are annoying.
Sometimes I will find people will go to several different readers, one doing runes, one doing tarot, one doing something else, and remarkably enough, they will get similar readings from all 3 methods.
I know. I did that. When my husband died, I went to 6 different psychics asking which of my skills I should try and use to make money. And I kept rephrasing the question to try and get another answer. And all of them came out with any of them, but you have to pick one. And not wanting to pick one, I never did. but I kept trying to rephrase it to get a different answer, and they all gave me the same answer, which pretty much means it is the right answer, and I refuse to listen. So I feel for people who do that. Been there, done that.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes you will also have people who come across as emotionally needing more support than you are qualified to give. Sometimes what I like to do is I make up a list ahead of time. If I'm reading, let's say, at a Renaissance fair, I will make up a list of agencies in the area that can provide emotional support, psychological support, things like that, so that I can have it ready if someone says, oh, I've got such a problem, I don't know where to go, don't know who to turn to, and I can pull the list and say, here are some places that you might consider. People will expect you to be a psychologist, psychiatrist, a sounding board, listening post, and unless you actually have the training for it, that's something you want to be cautious about. I won't say avoid, because part of what I do as my job as a reader is to provide some guidance, give people a new perspective on things, but I am far from being a trained psychologist. And it's kind of a balancing act. between just brushing people off, which I don't want to do, or making promises, or worse, deciding for them what they should do. My job is to give them perspective, give them insight, give them things to think about. It is not to make decisions for them. And that is something that can be difficult, for, I think, for a new reader to do. You want to help them. You want to make things better for them. At least I'm assuming that's one of the reasons you're doing readings. But you're not a professional psychologist, unless you happen to be, and that's a whole nother story. But that's something you want to be aware of. Don't make yourself out to be an expert, because there is always more for someone to learn. And yes, I've been doing readings for 40 some odd years. It doesn't mean I know everything. And I do not claim to know everything. If someone that you go to for a reading says, oh, I am an expert, I guarantee that my readings are accurate, turn around and run the other direction. This is my opinion, let's put it that way. That is my opinion.
I think we all have that. The point is that you're trying to empower them, not try and make yourself look good. But I think many of us who've been doing this for a while have seen the divination addict, the person who is trying very, very hard not to make up their own mind. So they will turn to automatic writing, they will turn to psychics, they will turn to their horoscope in the paper. They will do everything to disempower themselves and put themselves in the hands of somebody else. And I believe the job of the reader is to empower them and show them where their power is. So that I'm sorry, I'm jumping on your point, but it's an excellent point.
Do we want to open the floor for questions?
I keep prompting and nobody's asking questions. Okay, then I will ask another question that I think, what steps should a beginning reader take? You already mentioned jot down notes. I always leave paper and pens for clients to take notes, or suggest that they have a friend taking notes. When reading for myself, I have a notebook that I write down readings in, and I put them up. So I've got my little, there it is, Harry Potter notebook with all of my notes in. And then you can look back and you can see, oh yeah, I made that reading, and oh yeah, that was, so my interpretation was full of it. My advice is to date it and make sure you write down what the question is. In many forms of soothsaying, getting the question right is the key to getting the answer you need.
All good points. All good points.
Take off from that, I'm hoping.
Again, a lot of it comes down to practice. You don't even have, if you're practicing, what you want to do is be comfortable with the cards. Also, familiarize yourself with the particular spread that you're using. If you are using a set spread, learn what each position means and recognize how the card in one spot can influence or be influenced by the card in another spot. A reading does not have to be this huge 78 card monstrosity. I have done some very good readings with 6 cards. You can do a reading with 3 cards. If you're just looking for a quick indication or a hint of how your day is going to be, 1 card. The point is to learn your cards, to be comfortable with them. Some people will insist on wrapping their cards in all natural materials, which, if that's what feels good for you, then do that. My primary deck, I made a case for it out of plastic canvas and acrylic yarn. And for me, that works. To me, it's the intent that you put into it as much as what the materials are for storing your deck. I have another deck that I do keep wrapped in a piece of silk in a special wooden box, but that deck was a gift from someone that I'm very fond of. So I tend to treat that one a little bit more special. If you're comfortable just putting your cards in a little Ziploc bag and carrying them with you that way, by all means, do it. With tarot, and I believe with every other method, there is no right or wrong. It's whatever feels right for you, whatever works for you. You agree?
I do. I disappeared for a second to reach over here and grab my cards because people will call. Well, I'm on the computer and say, can I have a reading? And I have a lot of decks. At least some of them are because I have a friend who collects tarot. Last time I asked him, he had 550 something decks.
Oh, wow.
He has a dedicated room in his house. Used to be his son's room. His son moved out. He now has nothing but shelves with tarot decks on it and tables with them. And one of my very first decks, though, I'm going to tell you a few stories, share a few stories, since I'm not getting any questions, which I'd hoped for, that I have. Let's see if I can get a little bit more light on this. Can you see these? These are, can I get that close enough to my camera? Can you see that? You can see that we have, this is the Aquarian Tarot. Mm-hmm. Which is is that better or worse? The Aquarian Tarot is a 60s, 70s tarot with very big, bold, colorful things, but very scritchy, faint faces. No matter what if the face appears, the face is very pale and not as bright as the rest. Several of my friends in college had this deck, and we were comparing our decks. Could we get together and read together? Which, if you have friends who do tarot, is a great way to practice, because you can read for each other. And we pulled out these decks, which were no doubt printed by the same machine. And we laid out the court cards side by side and noticed that the faces had changed on these printed cards, so that one girl's Knight of Swords had started looking like her boyfriend, whereas the King of Swords and of Hearts in mine had started looking like my father. And the faces had changed, and we were able to hold the cards from the same printing deck together and see how these were changing.
Wow.
This is spooky food. This is the fun stuff that gets people excited about it. And
Yes. Yes.
and that was one of my first things. Other early things back from the 60s, they told us never to write it down, which is never write down a reading, which is the opposite of what I tell people. I say, write them down. How are you going to be able to remember if you don't write it down? But that was a big instruction when we were starting, is you never write it reading down. Write it down, because then you can build on it.
I never heard that.
They never told you that? Have you heard the one with you're not supposed to buy your own deck? It should be given or traded.
That I've heard. And I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, as I say, I've got about 40 of my decks are leftovers from my friend who accidentally bought more than one deck. So, in case you wonder, but you know, collectors are a different mental illness. Okay, well, here we have a question. Yay. Do you use some kind of protection before or during the reading? Do you cleanse or charge your decks like you would crystals or stones? Do you do anything to protect the cards themselves? Do you do something to cleanse or disconnect after a reading? Well, that's 4 different questions. I'm going to start out with one and then turn it over to you. Well, actually, no. As a group thing, I'm going to say I have observed cards, when you have used one deck exclusively for a very long time, the deck tends to destroy itself. And I'm saying after 2 or 3 years. I had a friend who had her cards in her purse, set it down on the sidewalk, went in to help somebody carry a large something out, found that her deck was on what was left of her deck was on the sidewalk beside her purse, with little smoke coming up from it, and she could only tell it had been her deck because there were a few cards left. She says that she had not been in the building long enough for anybody to have burned the cards with a torch, but they had self-combusted and just went up in smoke. She was definitely fire sign. I had a deck of cards that all of the colors ran. And you know cards are coded.
Yes.
But in a water sign, I think that if you put too much energy into them, they may self-destruct because of the amount of energy. I don't think any particular kind of protection would stop that. But I would say if you pick up a deck of cards and they feel like they're vibrating or feel overcharged to you, you might want to try and do some kind of cleansing on them, leave them in the moonlight or something.
Personally, I have never felt the need to cleanse my deck or recharge it. I will give it a good shuffle between clients. And usually when I do a reading, I wind up putting up a, if you will, a shield just around myself and my client to cut down on distractions, so that when I get involved with doing a reading, I really do not hear what is going on around me unless it becomes very loud, or if someone specifically calls my name. Otherwise, I am focused on the client, on the reading, and once the reading is over, I rarely remember what the reading said.
Yeah, that is a phenomenon that occurs with many forms of soothsaying. That you sometimes the reader is not privy to the information because it is private, and therefore, I like in a public thing like a fair, I will put up what we call the cone of silence, which I think is from Get Smart. And if you just draw a circle and around you and say and proclaim it to be a cone of silence, that helps keep things private. Other kinds of protection, I know people do. Do you know people who put up magic circles around when they're doing readings?
Yeah, I do. I've shared space with some of them. Again, if it's what feels comfortable for them or for anyone, then do it. I have never really felt the need for it. But that's
what
me.
about, you say cleansing or charging the deck? Now, I've charged a brand new deck. The question, you might want to cleanse a deck you pick up at a yard sale if you're going to use it and you didn't know it was who you were using it before. Would you think about that? Or
I've actually picked up a couple of decks at yard sales, but I've never really, again, I just, it's not where I come from. Yeah, a lot of the, I tend to focus more on practical aspects of doing readings rather than the, if you will, mystical.
Yeah.
I've just never felt the need for a lot of elaborate trappings. Although, if you are doing readings at a fair, to a certain extent, the trappings help. It gets people in the frame of mind. So I will sometimes have a table cover with a celestial print on it, or some kind of gazing ball or crystal display. But by and large, I just do it.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. I will say though, I do have a little crystal ball, and I was doing reading outdoors once, and suddenly one of the cards caught fire, and well, because the sun was coming right through and it hit the right place, and I noticed that there was a bright spot past the ball there, and the guy said, "Oh my God, what does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it means I put the crystal ball in the wrong place." But if you want, we can give we can put a little bit more weight on the meaning of that card. But no, by and large, the meaning is where you're putting it. And I wasn't projecting a request for a card to show me that it's more important. So I think that was simply a question of, I had my window dressing badly stationed. I can see that if there was somebody who was deeply disturbed, their cards could pick up that energy. And then if they got rid of their cards later, if they decided that Satan was in the cards and they had to get rid of them, you might want to cleanse them. But I tend to think that if you put the cards on the windowsill for a while, that'll take care of it. Now, the last question she asked, what about cleansing or disconnecting after a reading? I think that's real. I have tried both palm reading and card reading at fairs, and I much prefer card reading for any situation where I'm cycling through every 15 minutes. The cards do the work. I don't have to attach to the client. When I'm doing palmistry, you're holding the person's hand, you're making a psychic connection. I find it harder to disconnect. But with the cards, God, I love them. They do all the work. They're the heavy lifters.
I can tell usually if I've been expending too much energy when I start having trouble focusing on the reading. And at that point, I put up a little sign that says, "We'll return shortly," and I go have something to eat, or I go check out the vendors, or just step away for a few minutes to let my energy come back up.
Mhm. Yeah, eating is important. Drinking, perhaps even more so.
Yes.
Get into the habit of having a drink easily available.
Preferably non-alcoholic.
Oh yeah, I was at, was it something, it was New Jersey, it was a fair the SCA does, I think. And somebody brought me a great big lemonade,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking nonstop, and I finally got to drink it at 5 o'clock because I didn't shut up for 8 hours straight, long enough to take a sip of lemonade. I have gotten smarter since then.
One of the things the people who are with me have learned to keep an eye on me and make sure that I drink, because I will forget to. I will forget to drink, I will forget to eat until I start to fade.
Yep. You have to be careful about that.
You
I
need to take
personally
care of
know
yourself.
that a circle you put up can be a good physical barrier. If you haven't thought of it and you're outside, you can put up a UV shield to protect you from getting sunburned, or keep the mosquitoes and black flies away. If you haven't thought of it, yeah, a lot of us have this ability but don't realize it, so they've never tried. Give it a shot. I have used it effectively. I can't always. If I'm low energy, I can't. But if I'm right up there, you can use it for sunblock. But
I will have to keep that in mind, because living down here in North Carolina, the sun is a lot stronger than it was in New Jersey.
And you're very pale. So yes, some of us who are melanin deficient need all the help we can get. But the thing is that I know the energy does shield. When I'm putting up any kind of a circle, carefully work on what the circle is there for. The last thing you want to do if you're going to be doing readings is put up I'm going to keep all the influences out barrier, because then you're not going to be able to get a decent reading. Like, no, I want the information coming in, please.
It has to be selectively permeable. It can allow the good things in, but keep the bad things out.
I think a lot of magic needs to be that way. So other than that, you don't do?
No.
No, just do some good theater, wear your nice garb, and now that I'm getting old, I can play the old crone so much more easily.
I mean, you're not 29 anymore?
Hmm?
You're not 29 years old anymore?
No, I'm not putting wrinkles on the way I had done. I'd done that before. It's like to get a little bit of gravitas in there. It's a little bit harder when you're 20 and cute to look as serious. Oh God, and they trust you so badly. Oh my gosh. They do. They come to you and they want you to solve all their problems.
Mm-hmm.
Said, no, I'm sorry, it's on you. You have to solve your problems. But, and this is the important part, you have the ability. You have it in you. You have to choose to take it on yourself. Don't give away your power. Often you have to point out to them that they gave away their power sometime in the past and they have to reclaim it. And usually if you make that suggestion, they can say, yes, I know I gave my power to my first husband. I gave my power to my boyfriend. I gave my power to my father. And I said that, well, you've got to take it back. Just say, you are a powerful woman. You are a strong woman. Look at yourself in the mirror every morning and say, I can handle this. And you may not believe it for a month, but still say it every day. Our role is empowerment.
Yes.
Would you agree on that one?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
We do have more we have information you can't get other ways, but
I tell people that I want to give them a new perspective on problems that they may be facing. Give them different things to think about, and not to make the decision for them. Do you find that you get more women as clients than men?
Yes, I do. I remember once at a fair, I had a gentleman come up and I commented to him that he was the first man I'd ever seen who came up without a girlfriend or wife with him. And he said, oh, she's over there across the street waiting. She sent me. I have very rarely had, I had one client, repeat client. He kept coming to a coffee shop where I worked. He was a lawyer, middle-aged. He'd come every 2 weeks and he couldn't shuffle. He had to, rather than shuffle, he had to take the deck and stir it on the table and then stack it back up because he had never gotten the ability to shuffle. And I did readings for him. But so that was the only one who leaps to mind is just masculine. And so Felice asked, would a male card reader attract more male clients? I expect they would. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think because I have shared space with Sean, who uses cards, and I didn't notice a particular influx of male clients to him as opposed to the rest of us. Speaking of repeat clients, one memory that I treasure was I did a reading for a woman, and she came back a little while later with her boyfriend, husband, significant other, pick one, and I did a reading for him. He seemed all right. I was at the same fair a year later. He came back to me and said that he thought that I had just made stuff up out of thin air. But everything that I told him happened during the course of the year. And for several years afterwards, he came back to me, said that my readings for him were his homework for the year. One year, he actually gave me just a simple computer printout of a quote from Shakespeare that I had used during his first reading. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And it wasn't until he'd been coming to me for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that I found out what his occupation was. He was a practicing clinical psychologist.
Ah,
And he would come to me every year for a tarot reading. I treasure that memory because it shows that even people who you would think are very much based in fact and science can be open to more things, can be open to the metaphysical.
yep. I think that's true. We have got another question. What would be a good recommended deck for starting? I would recommend the Coleman Smith, the basic Rider-Waite Coleman Smith deck. I prefer calling the Coleman Smith because she was the artist. Rider and Waite made Waite investigated the symbolism, and Rider came up with the told her what to draw, but she was the one that did it. So I think we should call it the Coleman Smith deck. But I like the symbolism. It's very basic symbolism. I also like the Robin Wood deck because she explains in her book why she chose different colors and things. What do you suggest if you have a suggestion?
Definitely what I call the Waite Rider.
Mm-hmm.
There are other decks which use similar symbolism. I used the Hanson Roberts deck. The imagery is similar to Waite, but I find that the readings tend to be warmer. It also has a separate card that can be used for when the universe isn't ready to reveal things to you. It shows a person pulling a curtain back from a doorway and says, "To all believers." Another good deck would be the Morgan Greer. Again, similar imagery, but the colors are very, very bright, very warm. The Radiant Tarot also is, I think they took the original imagery and brightened the colors on it. So that's another option for people. There are lots of decks out there. You need to explore and see what feels right to you.
Yeah, definitely, because they have different, for anybody who, now maybe not this year in the changing times, changing worlds, but if you know other people get together and see what decks they may or may have, people do tend to collect decks, not to the extent I do, but you see one and it really appeals and you get it, and then you go back to your favorite deck. For anybody who's really serious, I suggest making your own deck. Get your get the Eden Gray tarot book and a deck of blank index cards and do one a day. There's nothing that's going to make, it doesn't matter how artistically inclined you are. If you have made the deck yourself, it will resonate with you. I do like the idea of they have in craft stores a little, it's like a hole punch. It'll take the corner off, it'll round the corners, yes. And that'll keep them from getting bent, and that keeps them from getting hard to shuffle. But make your own deck is a wonderful way of getting to know. And I have never seen a client turn their nose up at a homemade deck, even when the images are very crude. And then you can change them if you want. When I did my deck, I saw, I had, for death, I had a body under the ground, and then coming up out of it, a glowing spirit full of joy, because they had undergone the change that from matter to spirit. Whatever your symbols are, for strength, I had a dandelion breaking through pavement. You can make your own symbols. Tarot is a great set of symbols, but you can rework them yourself. I personally like the recently added Happy Squirrel, which only 5 decks that I know of so far have it, because it came from a Simpsons episode. And basically it's something that looks cute and innocent and will mess you up, which is a very useful card in a reading. But we're getting close to the end, and this is going to be your last chance to, look in the chat, see if anybody has any other questions. I do not think there are. Anybody else? You wave your little hands if you want to get our attention. Well, then I will thank you. I will urge you all to tell your friends if you think that this is useful. The key to changing times, changing worlds is that, as Lois said earlier, we're trying to make it work. We're trying to make it functional. We're less concerned about how does it work, or then how can I make it work better for me? Thank you, Lois, and if you give you a chance to say any final words if you'd like.
Well, I've enjoyed this. I hope other people have found it useful. And you can always post a question on the Changing Times Facebook group. And we hope to see you at our virtual conference this year.
And every Wednesday night until then, we're going to be doing a workshop type thing. So thank you
all for coming.
Thank you. And now push the stop. Stop recording.